Welcome back to the Aubergine Chef. Now today we'll be making the chocolate raspberry ganache cake, which is actually from the Cake Bible by Rose Levy Berenbaum. And in her book she calls it La Porcelaine, but I didn't feel like that actually described what the cake was made of. So I figured for purposes of the internet and telling people what it is, I figured calling it the chocolate raspberry ganache cake was a little bit more clear. But anyway, we're going to be making it pretty much exactly as she says in the book. I changed a few things around, but I'm pretty much keeping the ratios and the components pretty much the same. And we're going to be doing a lot of different things. So if you're going to be making this cake from scratch and you're going to be doing exactly what I'm going to be doing, make sure you give yourself like a full day ahead of time to make this cake. You don't want to be so busy preparing for a party and making this cake at the same time, because you're just not going to have the time unless you take some shortcuts. And I'll explain some shortcuts along the way as we're doing different things. For example, we'll be making chocolate fondant stems for roses. We're making chocolate roses from scratch. Chocolate leaves. We'll also be making the cake. We'll be icing it with ganache, which is a lot easier than making buttercream, so that's one plus. And then we'll be covering the cake with fondant. And I have a great surprise for you guys. I have a friend coming. Her name is Josie. She's from the food blog All in the Name of Noms. And she is a cake decorator as well. And she's going to show us her cake decorating technique for this cake. We're also going to be following the instructions in the book, so that way we have that extra free-form look to it as well. So we've got a lot planned for this episode, so I hope you guys have a great time learning lots of different things. So one of the first things you want to do is you want to do a lot of prep work, because like I said, there's a lot of different things if you're making this from scratch that you need to incorporate. For example, the raspberry ganache is ganache plus raspberry sauce. So that's actually two separate recipes that we're making and then combining into one. So for the raspberry ganache, what you want to do is you want to buy 24 ounces of frozen raspberries, or 1 pound 8 ounces. Same thing for fresh, it's equal proportions. And then if you use frozen, you want to thaw them out. And you want to make sure you collect any juices that drip down. So thaw them out on a strainer in a bowl, like this. Kind of like this. So that way all the juices collect in the bottom. Now, what you also want to do is, after they've thawed out pretty much most of the way, you want to go ahead and puree them in a food processor or a blender. Make sure they're all cut up. There's no chunks of raspberry left. Now, there's two different ways you can do this. Now, one, you can squeeze out the juices ahead of time, then puree the raspberries to collect extra juice as well as some of the pulp, and then make the syrup and the pulp and combine them together to have a more unique textured sauce. Now, that takes a long time to make. So what I'm doing is I'm combining both. I've already pureed the whole thing, the raspberries and the juice all together, and I'm straining out the seeds right now, so as well as some of the membrane. So mine's going to be a saucier sauce rather than a more pulpy sauce. So depending on which direction you want to go. Like I said, this way it's going to be a little bit faster, but if you want a more textured sauce, make sure you squeeze out the juice first, then puree the pulp, make the syrup with just the juice, and then stir in the pulp. So that's two different directions. And I'll explain it in my blog post as well. My blog post will be at www.theauberginechef.com. So I'm going to go ahead. Now, my raspberries were still a little bit frozen, so I kind of have like a smoothie going on here. So I'm still thawing out while I'm draining the juices. So another thing you want to do ahead of time is you want to take 2 1/4 ounces or half a cup plus 3 tablespoons of sifted cocoa powder, unsweetened. You want to make sure you sift it, because it's going to save you a heck of a lot of trouble. And you want to add in 1 cup or 8 1/4 ounces of boiling hot water. And you kind of just want to make a hot cocoa mixture, basically. You just want to stir it all the way up. And then the reason you want to do this ahead of time is you want this cooled down to room temperature, because when we make the cake, we're going to be adding this to eggs. And we don't want to cook the eggs, but we also don't want to have the mixture super hot either. So do that like right after you get the raspberries ready, and then let it sit so that way it cools down to room temperature. Now, some other things you can do ahead of time is you can make the chocolate leaves way ahead of time, and you can make the chocolate fondant stems way ahead of time. And I advise you to make both to save yourself some trouble, especially for the stems, because chocolate fondant, especially satin ice chocolate fondant, takes forever to dry. And I didn't really take the time to make them ahead of time because I completely forgot about that. So mine are probably still going to be pretty soft. I've got about a good 6 hours that I've dedicated to this cake, so maybe they'll be a little bit firmer by that time, but I seriously doubt it. But anyway, so those are two more things you can do ahead of time. Another thing you can do ahead of time is make the modeling paste, or modeling chocolate. Now, this modeling chocolate recipe also came from the Cake Bible. It's a great recipe, very easy, and she even included 3 variations depending on the kind of chocolate you're using. Now, her regular recipe asks for using red coating chocolate, and what we're actually going to be using is the white coating chocolate recipe, even though I have red coating chocolate. Now, the reason why is because this isn't actually coating chocolate. It's candy melt, the Wilton candy melts that you can buy at Michael's, for example. So there's no actual cocoa in it. So we want to use the white coating chocolate recipe because white coating chocolate doesn't have any cocoa in it. So make sure you read the labels. If it has cocoa in it, you're going to want to use the coating chocolate recipe. And if it doesn't have cocoa in it, you want to use the white coating chocolate recipe. And I'll make notes on the recipe for you, and I also put it in my blog. So remember, when we're doing this, we're doing the white coating chocolate recipe. We're just using coating chocolate that doesn't have any cocoa in it. So basically, it's literally just a candy melt. That's why they call it candy melts. So I've melted down 6 ounces of red white coating chocolate. And to that, we're going to add 26 grams of corn syrup. Okay, so once you've added your 26 grams of corn syrup, you want to go ahead and stir it all together. And it's going to get nice and stiff and firm. And it's going to ball up. Okay, so it'll probably look like something like this once you finish stirring in the corn syrup. Go ahead and keep mixing it to make sure the corn syrup gets nice and mixed in. And then after that, we're going to wrap it with some plastic wrap. And then leave it at room temperature for at least 6 hours. That's why I said you should make it ahead of time. And what's great about this coating chocolate, or this modeling chocolate, is that it lasts up to 8 weeks at room temperature, and for like a year frozen, or even basically indefinitely. But you don't want to keep something in your freezer forever. So about 1 year. So definitely make this ahead of time. Way, way ahead of time. Okay, so now we're going to make the cake. It's called All-American Chocolate Butter Cake. It's a pretty simple recipe. Remember, we have the 2 1/4 ounces of cocoa powder, mixed with 8 1/4 ounces of boiling water, and we let it cool down to room temperature. So now we're going to go ahead and finish the recipe. So one of the first things you want to do is you want to get 2 9-inch cake pans, spray them with pan relief, and just put a square piece of parchment paper right in the middle. You don't need to put it all the way around the edge. So the next thing you want to do is you want to break 3 eggs, take in a little bit of vanilla extract, about 2 1/4 teaspoons. Okay, and then take about 1/4 of this cocoa mixture that you made with the boiling water and the cocoa powder, and just mix it all together with a whisk. Alright, so on the mixer we have 8 1/4 ounces of all-purpose flour, or 2 1/4 cups plus a couple tablespoons, 2 tablespoons. We also have 10 1/2 ounces of granulated sugar, or 1 1/2 cups. I also have 15 grams of baking powder and 5 grams of salt. And we sifted all those ingredients together to help make sure that there was no lumps, just like the cocoa powder. And so what we're going to do right now is we're just going to mix it on low speed to kind of mix all the ingredients together. Alright, so next we're going to add in 8 ounces, or 2 sticks, of room temperature unsalted butter, as well as the remaining amounts of the cocoa mixture. Okay, we're going to mix this on low speed just until all the ingredients are moistened. Then we're going to kick it up to medium, high speed and mix it for about 1.5 minutes to make sure it's nice and aerated. Okay, so after you've mixed it for 1.5 minutes, scraped in the sides of your bowl, then on low speed, slowly add in your egg, cocoa, and vanilla extract mixture. Okay, so pour the finished batter into the cake pans about halfway to 3/4 of the way up. So once you put it into your cake pan, make sure to smooth down the batter a little bit. Make sure it goes all the way to the edges. And then what we're going to do is we're going to bake it at 350 degrees for about 25 to 35 minutes, or until the cake test's done. And what I mean by that is if you stick a cake tester, toothpick, or a knife into the center of the cake, it comes out clean. Okay, so we're going to make our raspberry sauce now. You want to make sure to use a fairly deep bowl when you're making your sauce. Remember that we thawed out 24 ounces of frozen raspberries, and then we pureed them in a food processor and strained out all the seeds and just kept some of the pulp, but mostly juice. Now we're on the stove over high heat. We're probably going to reduce it to about medium just to keep it steady without, overcooking the raspberry sauce. But we've also added 4 3/4 ounces, or 2/3 cup of granulated sugar for sweetness. And then after we take it off the stove, we're going to add in 10 grams, or 2 teaspoons of fresh lemon juice, basically half a lemon. Now what we're doing is we're reducing the sauce to make it thicker and more syrupy, and we're going to do this until about half of it evaporates. Okay, so our cakes have cooled off for about 10-15 minutes on the wire cooling racks. To release them, run a knife along the edge of the cake to make sure it's not sticking to the side. Then we'll take a 8-inch cake circle, and it should if it doesn't pop right out, give it a couple good bangs, and then it should pop right out. Then flip it over. We'll take off the piece of parchment paper and flip it over back onto the wire rack and allow it to cool all the way down before using it. Okay, to finish off our ganache, our raspberry ganache, we need to have 12 ounces of bittersweet chocolate chips and 3 ounces of white chocolate chips, or white chocolate. And then I have on the stove boiling 8 ounces of heavy cream. And then we're going to combine the boiled heavy cream to these chips. And then just keep stirring this until all the chocolate melts and you have a nice smooth mixture. Okay, to the raspberry ganache, or to the ganache that we just made, we're going to go ahead and add in 4 3/4 ounces of our raspberry sauce. Okay, and then just stir that in as well. Alright, and then this is optional. If you don't want to add this, you don't have to. But I'm going to add in 24 grams of raspberry liqueur. Okay, we're just going to chill this in the refrigerator until this comes to about icing consistency. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and make the roses and the chocolate leaves for the top of the cake. You can make these ahead of time, like I said earlier in the video, if you want. I'm going to go ahead and do this while I'm waiting for the icing to cool, or the ganache to cool. So one of the first things you want to do is take your modeling chocolate. Now it's set up, and it's going to be nice and it's going to be very brittle. And when you knead it together, it's going to soften up and become more clay-like. So the first thing you want to do is you want to form a 1.5 to 2 inch conical kind of shape, conical kind of shape for the center of your rose. Then you want to knead together some more the modeling chocolate. Okay, and then between 2 pieces of plastic wrap, go ahead and roll out your modeling chocolate. And using an A26 piping tip, I'm going to use it like a cookie cutter and cut out the petals for the roses. Now you can do smaller size, you can do smaller petals for the center and then use larger ones on your way out. I just think it's easier to have all the same size so you don't have to keep switching behind a bunch of cutters and circles. Okay, so to form your rose, start with the center and then tightly wrap one of the petals around to create basically a bud. And you can thin out the edges of the petal if you want with your fingers to make it a little bit more dainty. Then take 2 more petals, 2 or 3, and kind of start building the flower around that center petal. Oops. Then from that center petal, take about 5 to 7 of the more petals and stick them closer to the bottom until basically you have what looks like a rose. And you can go back with the paring knife and kind of just adjust the petals as you want to make it more rose-like or however. And that's pretty much how you make a modeling chocolate rose. Now you can also do this with marzipan and fondant and gum paste. Then with this piece of modeling chocolate on the bottom, you can ball it up and pinch it off. So that way it's more of the size that you're looking for. Okay, so we're going to make the chocolate leaves now. I've got about 3 to 6 ounces of coating chocolate here, melted. And we're going to use this on real rose leaves. Now these rose leaves came from basically my garden, the outside rose bush. And the reason I did that was because at florists, sometimes they use pesticides. And even if you wash them, pesticides can get inside rose petals and leaves, and it's very difficult to get it out. So it's better just to get rose petals or leaves that haven't been sprayed with pesticides at all. You still want to rinse it off and wash it off just like you would like herbs or anything like that. But then you want to make sure it's also very dry too. So what you want to do is take a paintbrush and then paint on a pretty thick layer of coating chocolate. Alright, and then once you've covered it with coating chocolate, go ahead and put it on a sheet pan lined with parchment paper, and then pop it in the refrigerator for about 3 minutes, or the freezer, either or. Freezer sometimes works a little bit better. I'm going to go ahead and finish painting the rest of my leaves. You need about 20 leaves to compensate for breaking and stuff like that. Alright, so to finish off the chocolate leaves, all you need to do is peel off the leaf from the chocolate. Start with the stem. And then using a paintbrush, because you don't want to use your hands because you might melt the chocolate more, just peel back the leaf like a back of a sticker. And there you go. There's your chocolate leaf. Now, against the parchment paper, you can see areas where it's thinner and it's kind of shining through a little bit. On the dark chocolate cake, it won't show as much. But also you just know where you need to paint a little bit thicker next time. You're a little bit more aware. You can also do a second layer if you want. Although I think that after you do a second layer, it gets really heavy and thick. Alternatively, you can make gum paste leaves and use this as a stamp and press it against the leaf, your gum paste, peel it off, and then you have a stenciled leaf. So that's another way to have chocolate leaves on your cake. Alright, our ganache is firm enough to ice our cake. So first thing you want to do is put down a wet paper towel, so that way your board doesn't move while you're icing your cake. Take a little bit of the ganache, put it in the center of the cake board, and you're going to use that as glue for your first cake layer. This cake is very, very tender and very easy to break. So put down about a cup and a half of ganache. This is the raspberry ganache. And just spread it onto the top of your cake. Take your next cake layer, put it on top of the ganache, press down to make it secure, and then clean the area of any cake crumbs, because any cake crumbs can get into your icing. Granted, the icing is ganache, and it's really, really dark, and then we're going to cover it with fondant, but it's just a good habit to practice. So take your ganache, put some on top, and you want to go ahead and ice the cake. You want to make sure to ice it as smooth as you can, since we're covering it with fondant, because any imperfections in the icing will be mimicked in the fondant. So what you want to do is take some of the icing onto your spatula and just press it onto the side, just like this. Reach over and push it into the side. Don't worry about the cake cardboard. We can go back around and clean that up very easily. Okay, so to get the icing as smooth as possible on the sides, use a bench scraper and holding it very steady and holding it against the cardboard, use it kind of like a snowplow and push the icing around. Now you're not trying to take off icing, you're just trying to move it around. And that'll give you a nice smooth side. Okay? Then to smooth out the top of the cake, take your spatula and just pull the ring that formed from the sides, from icing the sides, and just pull it towards the center. Okay, and just keep repeating this process of smoothing at the sides and then smoothing at the top until you get it nice and level and smooth looking. And we're pretty much where we want to be. I have a few bumps on my top of my layer that I want to even out, but other than that, it's pretty much good to go. I'm going to refrigerate it for about 30 minutes or so until the ganache firms up. Alright, so this is my friend Josie from over at the blog All in the Name of Noms, and go ahead and just introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Okay, well, in addition to co-authoring the blog with my friend Eric, who may be on another episode.
He should be in another episode coming up soon.
I also teach wilted cake decorating classes, and I'm an intern in a bakery.
Oh, okay. What do you do at the bakery? What's the bakery about and stuff like that?
It's called Buzz Bakery. It's in Alexandria. I just do mostly cake. I'm a specialty cake decorating intern, so.
All right, cool. So what Josie's going to do for us today is she's going to show her way of covering cakes with fondant. You've seen my way of covering fondant in other episodes, such as the 3D cake and the birthday cakes, the tiered cakes, all that. And so this is just another perspective, especially from a wilton cake decorator. So since I've never taken wilton classes, it's a good chance to see someone do it in a completely different way. So that way, if my way didn't work for you, her way can maybe make it a little bit easier for you. So why don't we go ahead and get started. How much fondant do we have here? Did you measure it out, or?
Well, if there's 2 pounds in the container, this is half, so 1 pound of fondant.
So we're using 1 pound of fondant. We're using the Satin Ice dark chocolate fondant, and I just want to let you guys know that this fondant's really super sticky. It's super moist. So you want to go ahead and knead in a good amount of cocoa powder, as she has already done, so that way it dries up and it's nice and firm. Now, if you want to keep it a little bit on the softer side or on the wetter side, that's up to you, but just be aware that it's really, really sticky, and it's going to stick to your cake, your fingers, and the table. So just be aware of that.
I prefer to work with it much drier, and I've got the work surface prepped a little bit with cocoa powder, but I'm going to add some more before I start.
And we're just using unsweetened cocoa powder. This is the Bernsdorf brand. Feel free to use the Hershey's or the Ghirardelli, whatever works for you. And then we're going to be rolling it out with a smooth rolling pin. It's a plastic rolling pin, unlike a wooden rolling pin. There's no creases or dents in it. You want to make sure to keep this clean and use it only for your gum paste and fondant work. So I'm going to bring the camera over here before you get started so you can see close.
So I'm just going to start rolling it out. I've always been told only roll in one direction. Is that what you've heard too?
I've heard a little bit of both. What I like to do is I like to actually flip it over and then roll it out.
That's the other trick, is just always keep it moving. Which I've got it pretty powdery, so it's not sticking to anything.
And any excess powder that's left on the fondant, we can brush off with a paintbrush or our hands or a paper towel. So it's not a big deal if you go a little heavy on the cocoa powder. Use as much as you guys feel comfortable with. So about how far do you go out when you're rolling out the fondant when you're doing cakes that are 9 inches, and I think it's about 2.5 to 3 inches tall? Well, we can, if we add up the sides and if we assume that the sides of the cake are about 3 inches, and then we have the 9 inches, so it's 15 inches. So
that's about right.
That sounds, yeah, I was going to say, it's usually about what I do, and then maybe an inch further just to compensate, because the chocolate fondant does stretch quite a bit.
Yeah, I could tell that it was pretty stretchy, which is good. Okay. So I'm going to roll it loosely over the rolling pin. And then I can put the cake in the workspace. And then just unroll over it. And start to smooth the top. Which, if you have a fancy tool for that, might make it easier. I don't ever use it, so.
Yeah, I don't have a fondant smoothing tool.
I think your hands are your best tools. Okay, so I'm just going to cut off the excess so I don't have too much to work with. So start to smooth down the sides. And the way to avoid wrinkles is just to stretch it out at the ends. And then just to the edge with the pastry wheel. And it's okay if it's imperfect in places because this is getting an extra band of fondant around it.
Now, how do you feel about it already being on the show board? Do you like to move it onto the show board after you've covered it with fondant?
I don't want to move it any more than I have to.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
So this is perfect what you've done.
Okay, so we've taken a piece of parchment paper and we've taped it down to the table. We need about 28¼ inches for the circumference of the cake. So we're probably going to roll it out to about 29 or somewhere in between. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the parchment paper and lift it around the cake. So Josie's going to roll out the fondant and show us how to do that. Okay, now the edge that Josie's cutting right now is going to go flush against the cake. So we want to make sure that edge is nice and flat because we don't want to pile up any fondant on the bottom of the cake. Should we cut off the excess parchment paper, or how are you going to manipulate it?
How do you feel about just letting it hang loose?
If you think that'll work. Alright, let me make sure the camera's centered.
Because if it stretches, all it's going to do is make that top edge a little more imperfect, and that's okay because it kind of hangs anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's pretty sturdy.
Yeah, it's working pretty well. Now, if you wanted to, you can use your parchment paper or your plastic wrap to manipulate and move your fondant. We're lucky we've kneaded in quite a bit of cocoa powder, so it's pretty firm. So all we really need to do is just stick it to the cake. Josie's using a little bit of vodka in some places to help stick it a little bit more. But other than that, it's really not taking any more ingredients.
Okay, so we have quite a bit of excess here. Can I just snip that?
Okay.
And then just a dab of vodka to seal the edge.
Now, if we were having issues with the fondant sticking up, what would you use to kind of keep it in place?
You could just use little bits of cotton balls and stick kind of, here and there to hold it up until it sets up on its own.
How would you feel like marshmallows or chocolate fondant?
I actually would probably feel better about that because it's more food safe.
Okay.
So.
Alright, so that's pretty much what we're looking for. We have that nice ruffled look around the edges. Obviously, the seam will go towards the back when you present the cake. We're going to go ahead and dust off the cake from all the excess cocoa powder, and when we come back, we'll be decorating the cake with the finished roses, the chocolate leaves, and the chocolate stems. So we went ahead and brushed the cake with a little bit of vodka to get rid of some of the excess cocoa powder. The vodka is probably going to evaporate eventually, but for now, it has this really nice, shiny, glazed look. And
I'm actually hoping it stays like that because I think it's nice.
yeah, Josie said it looks very appetizing. So why don't we go ahead and finish up the cake? We're going to decorate. So we have our modeling chocolate roses. I have 5 here. You might want to go all the way up to 8, especially if you're decorating the pie plate or the cake stand like she does in the cover of her book. We've also got the stems, and we have the chocolate leaves. And I broke quite a few of my chocolate leaves because they came out much thinner than I expected. And we also have a little bit of coating chocolate on the side, melted, ready to go, just in case we want to glue the leaves down. But like I said, the leaves are just so delicate that they might break or melt if we use too much coating chocolate and we manipulate it too much. So we're going to do it pretty, as Josie puts it, organically. So you want to go ahead and take it from here?
So I'll just take the roses that Jason made and probably lay the flattest side down. What do you think, 3 on the top?
Sure.
Okay.
I like odd numbers when it comes to decorating.
Yeah. Nature doesn't like even numbers either. And then just do the stems probably there. And actually the vodka is making them stick, so that's perfect. Feel free to change anything while it's still...
Well, I like the contrast of
movable.
shiny against the dull stems. And then we can just really, organically just throw these on top.
I don't want to touch those because I'm afraid I'll melt them, so that's all you.
Okay. And I'm putting them against the sepals. I made some sepals out of more fondant, which is basically just a star that I pressed against the rose. And they didn't come out as nice as I was hoping,
So you're hiding them?
Yeah, so I'm hiding them actually. I'm hiding extra work that I did.
Oh, I love the difference of the color in the chocolate.
Yeah, actually, it's I didn't see it as much on the plate. I didn't think it would be so dramatic. Mm-hmm. But it's different layers of chocolate, different colors of chocolate, so it looks like different kinds of richness. Yeah. Okay, so that's pretty much it. We're just going to leave it as it is. I'm probably going to put a few more roses along the edges when I take my pictures for the cake. Like I said, you want to have a little bit of extra leaves and roses for when you put it on your pie or your cake stand. I keep wanting to say pie plate. Yeah, basically along the edge, just like that. And I have curved stems to go around, so it's a little bit more graceful along the side of the cake. Yeah. Well, that kind of works. Here, we'll just put the stem on now. We can always move it afterward.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm going to put one on this side, too.
Is that how you were imagining it?
Yeah, looks fine. Okay, so once again, that's the raspberry or chocolate raspberry ganache cake. I keep wanting to say raspberry chocolate. I guess
just change the name of it.
Well, maybe. I mean, I love the raspberry so much in the ganache. Josie tried the ganache. What did you think of the ganache?
Oh my god, it's so good.
Yeah, it's a really rich, strong raspberry flavor considering how little we ended up using. And the leftover raspberry puree sauce you can use for plated desserts. You can use for topping off pastries. You can use for a brownie batter. You can mix it into batters, not just brownie batters, cake batters too.
It would be really good.
Yeah, you can mix it in iced tea and all kinds of other stuff. Because remember, it's sweetened, so it'll sweeten stuff up as well. And pretty much feel free to adjust the recipe however you want. Feel free to use the cake for whatever you want, the raspberry ganache or whatever you want. Just take the components apart. But I was just wanted to be kind of true to the cake's recipe that she used in the book. So I guess that's pretty much it, unless you want to say anything or add anything.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so remember you can download all these recipes for free on my blog, www.theauberginechef.com. Josie, what's your blog's address?
All in the name of noms.wordpress.com.
Okay, so it's all in the name of noms.wordpress.com. And thanks for watching. And remember, The Aubergine Chef, demystifying dessert, one recipe at a time.